Everyone in the restaurant froze when the baby's scream shattered the silence. Crystal glasses trembled, forks paused mid-air, conversations died instantly. For a moment, it seemed as if the sound itself had weight, pressing down on every corner of the elegant bistro Araucaria. They all turned their heads, not toward the wine, not toward the chandeliers, but toward the man in the Armani suit, struggling with the small, writhing body in his arms. João Marx, CEO, multimillionaire, powerful enough to decide the fate of entire buildings and hundreds of families, sat powerless. His son, Arthur, 6 months old, cried with a desperation that nothing money, prestige, influence could silence. And in that instant, the man everyone feared in business looked fragile, terrified, human. João rocked the child clumsily, sweat foaming on his forehead, despite the cool air conditioning. "She, Arthur, please, please." The words came out cracked, as if he wasn't speaking to a baby, but to fate itself. His fingers, accustomed to pen strokes worth millions, contracts that reshape skylines, were awkward on the small body, unable to bring comfort. A bottle of special imported milk sat untouched on the table, gleaming under the light as if mocking his helplessness. His important client from Porto Alegre glanced at his watch discreetly, a gesture sharper than a blade to João's pride. Time was money, and João was losing both. That was when she appeared, Renata, the timid waitress whose presence most barely noticed in that temple of wealth. White shirt, navy vest, apron tied with precision, hair pulled back in the kind of knot that made her fade into the background. She had been working here only 2 months, another invisible worker moving silently through the empire of the powerful. Yet now, as the cries grew unbearable, she found herself stepping closer, her small voice trembling but clear. "Excuse me?" "May I try?" João hesitated. Since the death of Camila in childbirth, no stranger had held his son. He guarded Arthur like a final remnant of her, the only anchor left in a sea of grief. But the client's eyes pressed him, impatient, almost hostile. And his son screamed as though each second carved pain deeper into his tiny body. João nodded stiffly. Renata reached out. She lifted Arthur with a natural grace, supporting his head against her shoulder, her other hand patting gentle circles on his back. Then she began to sing softly a lullaby foreign to João's ears, a melody from the north of Brazil where her childhood lived. Her voice was not strong, but it carried something rarer, calm. Within seconds, the miracle unfolded. The piercing cries softened, first to sobs, then to hiccups, and finally to silence. Arthur's eyelids fluttered, heavy with sleep, his small chest rising and falling against Renata's shoulder. The room breathed again. A collective sigh spread among the tables. The client leaned back, visibly relieved, sipping his wine with a faint smile. João sat frozen, watching, not just because his son had quieted, but because of how Renata hadn't simply applied a trick. There was something in the way she held him, in the whispers close to his ear, a tenderness that money couldn't buy. "He probably has colic," she murmured, without looking up. This position helps release the discomfort. When Arthur finally drifted into sleep, Renata returned him carefully to João's arms. "If he cries again, hold him this way." She offered nothing else. No drama, no self-importance. Just the knowledge she carried from a life of caring for 6 nephews, a skill earned not in books, but in survival. João whispered, "Thank you." It was all he managed. She simply nodded, stepping back into the rhythm of her work as if nothing had happened. But for João, everything had shifted. For the first time since Camila's death, there was peace, however brief, and peace felt like air after drowning. The dinner moved forward without further incident. Contracts were discussed, agreements hinted, wine consumed. Yet João's eyes followed Renata across the room, tracing the calm in her movements. She was efficient, precise, invisible again, but no longer to him. When the check arrived, he left a generous tip, scribbled a note of gratitude on the back of the receipt, and for a fleeting second considered adding his number. But propriety held him back. When he rose to leave, Renata was gone, vanished into the kitchen, leaving behind only the echo of her lullaby in his mind. Driving his Audi down Avenida Paulista that night, Xiao realized he could not stop thinking about her. Not about her face, but about the way she had turned chaos into silence with nothing but kindness. Across the city, in a cramped apartment in Liberdade, Renata awoke early to the shrill alarm. Her day stretched merciless. Classes in the morning, hospital internship in the afternoon, restaurant shift at night. Coffee brewed in a chipped pot filled the air. "You woke up too soon," murmured Deborah, her roommate, emerging groggy. "Anatomy exam," Renata answered, sliding a mug across the table. She had long learned to live on little rest. Scholarships covered half the tuition, the rest she had to earn. Rent, books, transportation, her life was a juggling act with no safety net. As she showered, her mind replayed the night before. The millionaire, the baby, the desperation in his eyes. She had recognized Joa's face from magazines and waiting rooms, a figure belonging to another universe. That world had brushed against hers for a fleeting moment, but she knew better than to confuse that with connection. People like him forgot quickly. She buried the memory under pages of anatomy notes and pushed forward, but Joe did not forget. In his penthouse overlooking Ibirapuera Park, he watched his son sleep more peacefully than ever before. He had followed Renata's advice, holding the baby differently, and it worked. For the first time in months, silence filled the nursery. Yet instead of relief, he felt an ache because that silence had not been his doing. It belonged to her. His phone buzzed with endless work demands, meetings with investors, deals shaping neighborhoods. Still, his mind drifted back to the timid waitress with a gift no contract could secure. His nanny, Cecilia, arrived promptly, efficient as always. But even her decades of experience could not erase the thought that Renata had done something extraordinary, something genuine. The following evening, Joe made an unusual decision. He canceled a meeting and reserved a table again at Bistro Aracoria, specifically requesting to be served by Renata. His secretary, startled by the deviation from his strict routine, did not question him. By 8 p.m., Joe entered the restaurant, ardor in his arms. This time, the baby was calm, curious at the lights. When Renata approached the table, her cheeks flushed. "Good evening, Mr. Marks," she said formally. "It's a pleasure to serve you again." "The pleasure is mine," Joe replied, glancing at Ardor. "He seems happier tonight." Their conversation faltered into silence, heavy with the strangeness of their meeting. Joe cleared his throat. "I came to thank you properly. What you did, it meant more than you know." Renata looked at him, then down. "It was nothing. Just a technique anyone can learn." "Not to me," Joe insisted softly. "Since my wife passed, I've felt lost." That night was the first peace I've known in months. The vulnerability in his voice stunned her. For a moment, she saw not a CEO, but a man broken, trying to hold himself together for his son. She whispered, "I'm sorry for your loss." Their eyes met fully for the first time, and in them, Renata saw grief, raw and unshielded. Throughout dinner, they spoke in fragments. She told him about her nephews, about nursing school, about Recife. He shared little, but his questions revealed more than answers. He longed for guidance, for someone who knew what to do. At the end, Zhao made a sudden offer. "I would like to hire you," he said carefully, "not as a nanny, but as a consultant. Just a few hours a week, to teach me what you know." "I would pay well." Renata froze. The weight of worlds collided. His world, wealth, Power, skyscrapers. Hers, survival, exhaustion, anonymity. I can't, she said after a pause. My schedule, it's already full. She wasn't lying. But beneath the truth was fear, the fear of being drawn into a world where she would always be out of place. Joe nodded, embarrassed. Of course. Forgive me if I crossed a line. He left that night with another generous tip, but no note. A formality. A farewell. Weeks passed. Joe did not return. He buried himself in work, in ardor, in routines safe and predictable. Yet late at night, when his son stirred, he thought of her voice, of the way she had sung. Renata, meanwhile, drowned in studies, shifts, exhaustion. But sometimes, on crowded subway rides, she remembered the baby's soft weight against her shoulder, and the eyes of a man who seemed to carry the whole world, yet still looked lost. She told herself it had been just one night. Yet destiny has a way of circling back. One evening, Bistro Araucaria hosted a private event, a farewell dinner for the executive board of Marx and Corporations. Renata, assigned to the main floor, hoped the separation would shield her, but fate ignored her prayers. Near the bar, surrounded by suits and laughter, stood Joe Marx. Their eyes met briefly. She offered a professional nod, nothing more. He turned back to his colleagues. It should have ended there. Yet when Renata cleared a recently vacated table, she found a book left behind. Its cover was bright, almost childish. Techniques for Soothing Babies. She froze. Looking instinctively toward the exit, she saw Joe near the door. Without thinking, she hurried after him. Mr. Marx, she called softly. This is yours. He turned, startled. A faint color rose to his cheeks as he took the book. Thank you, he said. Their eyes locked. She knew then it had been no accident. He had left it for her. Renata hesitated, the book still warm from his hands. Something about the gesture unsettled her. It wasn't manipulation, at least not the kind she had grown accustomed to from men with money. It was vulnerability, almost clumsy. How is Arthur? She asked before she could stop herself. Joe's expression softened instantly. He's better, growing fast. The things you showed me, they've helped more than I can explain. His voice lowered, heavy with sincerity. For a moment, the restaurant noise faded, replaced by the fragile thread connecting them. But colleagues waited, eyes followed, and reality pressed down. I should go, Joe said finally. Thank you again. He walked out into the night, into the sleek car waiting for him, leaving her with the book and a heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. Days passed. Rain fell heavy over Snow Paulo. In her cramped apartment, Renata woke to fever, body aching, chest tight. She had ignored the cough for weeks, pushing through double shifts and exams until her body collapsed in rebellion. You're not working like this, Deborah insisted, dragging her back to bed. You'll kill yourself, Renata protested weakly, panic rising at the thought of missed shifts, lost wages. But the thermometer silenced her. 38.5. Pneumonia, the doctor at the overcrowded hospital confirmed. He recommended hospitalization, but she refused. Beds were scarce, money scarcer. Instead, daily injections, strict rest, hope that her body would hold. She walked out with a prescription heavier than her wallet, whispering prayers that she could stretch coins until the month's end. Across the city, Joe faced his own crisis. Arter's school called during an investor meeting. Fever, inconsolable crying. Joe's heart dropped. He rushed to the daycare, finding his son's small body hot and trembling. The pediatrician diagnosed a throat infection common, not grave, but terrifying when it was your child. Joe carried Arter home, prepared cold compresses, whispered comfort into the night. He tried the steam trick from the book, sitting in the bathroom, as vapor wrapped around them. Slowly, the baby's breathing eased, his body relaxing against his father's chest. Joe held him until dawn, marveling at the strange strength of such small moments. Yet, even in relief, a thought gnawed. What would Renata do? That same week, when Joe canceled a reservation at the bistro, explaining his son's illness, word slipped through staff to Renata. Lying feverish at home, she asked Deborah to call the restaurant, just to check if the baby was all right. A simple human impulse. She left no name, no message. But when Cecilia mentioned it later, Joe was shaken. In his world, concern was currency, always tied to favors, deals, agendas. But this was real. She had no reason to care, and yet she did. He dialed back, only to hear Deborah's voice explaining. Renata couldn't come to the phone. She was sick. Very sick. Pneumonia. Joe froze. The words hit harder than any business loss, sharper than any boardroom betrayal. Pneumonia wasn't a cold. For someone working double shifts without rest, it was dangerous. He thought of her pale face, the timid smile, the way she had steadied his son with hands steadier than his own. And now she lay in some tiny room, fighting for breath, with no one to hold her. That night, while Arthur slept, Joe stared at the city lights outside his window, caught between two worlds, the fortress of privilege he lived in and the fragile one she struggled through. For the first time, his wealth felt useless. Money couldn't erase grief. It couldn't bring Camilla back. But maybe, just maybe, it could protect someone who had once given him peace. The next morning, Gio instructed Cecilia to watch Arthur and left in his car, not to the office, but toward Liberdade. The address, discreetly obtained from the restaurant manager after a generous donation, led him to a narrow building wedged between shops. He climbed creaking stairs, his polished shoes absurd against the peeling walls. When the door opened, Deborah stared, stunned, at the figure in her doorway. The CEO, the millionaire, standing in jeans and a jacket, holding a bag of medicine. "I came to see Renata," he said simply. Deborah hesitated, then stepped aside. Renata lay in bed, face flushed, hair damp with fever sweat. She blinked at him in disbelief. "Mr. Marks?" Her voice was hoarse, barely audible. Joe set the bag on the knitstand. Antibiotics, fruit, broth, medicine she couldn't afford. "I heard you weren't well." He sat on the edge of the chair, awkward, unsure if he had crossed an invisible line. "I wanted to make sure you had what you needed." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Not of weakness, but of the cruel weight of being seen when you had trained yourself to be invisible. "You shouldn't have," she whispered. "I didn't ask for." "I know," Joe interrupted gently. "You never ask. That's the difference." Silence stretched, thick with emotions neither dared name. He didn't stay long. He knew his presence disrupted the fragile balance of her world. But as he left, he caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Gratitude, confusion, and a spark of the same connection he had felt since that first lullaby. In the car, he exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For once, his power wasn't contracts or money. It was choosing to care. Renata's recovery was slow, but within weeks, she returned to her routines. Yet something had shifted. Each time she saw Joe at the restaurant, because he returned discreetly, never flaunting. Always with ardor her heart tightened. He no longer asked for favors, no longer crossed lines. He came as a father, sometimes exhausted, sometimes smiling, but always different from the other men she served. And Arthur, oh Arthur, reached for her every time, tiny hands stretching with innocent trust. The line between worlds blurred, dangerously. One night, as rain lashed against the glass walls of the bistro, Joe lingered after his meal. The restaurant had emptied, leaving only shadows and quiet. Renata cleared the last table near his, her movements slower from fatigue. "You work too much," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. She glanced at him, startled. "Says the man who built half the city," she replied dryly, then bit her lip, regretting the sharpness. But Jiao only chuckled softly. "Touché." He hesitated, then added, "I don't want to cross lines again. But if you ever need anything for your studies, for your health, please know you can ask." His voice carried no arrogance, only a rare humility. Renata met his eyes, the weight of his sincerity pulling at something deep inside her. "And if I asked you to simply let me fight my battles?" she murmured. He nodded slowly. "Then I'll respect that." Their gaze lingered, and for the first time, Renata wondered if perhaps fate had tied a thread between them stronger than circumstance. Weeks turned into months. Jiao juggled boardrooms and bedtime stories. Renata juggled shifts and exams. Their encounters remained brief, fleeting, but each left a mark. Jiao learned to change diapers, to soothe fevers, to read bedtime tales, often guided by techniques from that small book, from memories of her advice. And Renata, though cautious, found herself glancing at the door whenever it opened, wondering if he would walk in, child in arms, eyes searching hers. The city, vast and merciless, seemed smaller when they shared the same air. Yet life rarely allows simplicity. Whispers began. At the restaurant, co-workers noticed his frequent returns, the way his gaze followed her. In boardrooms, acquaintances murmured about the widower CEO spotted with a waitress. Rumors sharpened into knives. Renata felt the weight of judgment pressing, threatening to suffocate her fragile independence. She thought of quitting, of vanishing before the gossip consumed her. But every time she saw Ardor smile, she stayed. For him, if not for Joe. The breaking point came on a stormy night. The power flickered, thunder rattled windows, and Ardor fell ill again, fever spiking suddenly. Jiao, panicked, called the pediatrician, but appointments were delayed. He remembered the steam trick, the lullabies, the soft certainty of Renata's touch. And for the first time, pride broke. He picked up the phone and dialed the number Deborah had once used. When Renata answered, her voice was steady despite the hour. "I'll come," she said simply. Minutes later, drenched from the rain, she stood in his apartment, taking the baby into her arms with the same calm she always carried. Within half an hour, Ardor's cries softened, his breathing eased. Joe watched, helpless and grateful, his heart pounding with the realization. He didn't just need her for his son. He needed her because she brought back life into a home silenced by grief. When Ardor finally slept, Renata prepared to leave. But Joe stopped her at the door. His voice trembled, not with power, but with fear. "Renata, I don't know what this is. I only know that since the day you held him, I've felt less alone. You don't owe me anything. But I can't pretend you haven't changed everything." Her eyes filled, not with romance, but with the unbearable weight of choices. "Your world and mine, they don't mix," she whispered. "They destroy people like me." "Then let me build a bridge," Zhao answered. The storm raged outside, but inside, the silence was thick, fragile, electric. Two lives balanced on the edge of something neither had planned, something both feared, yet both needed. A thread, fragile but unbroken, stretched between grief and hope, between wealth and struggle, between a millionaire father and a waitress who carried lullabies in her chest. And though neither knew where it would lead, one truth had become undeniable. From the night the cries first shattered the silence, their worlds were no longer separate.